Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, February 14th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. Today in Riverside, expect a mild Valentine's Day with a high of 60.7 degrees and a low of 50.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Coming up, we'll examine the potential impact of Trump's proposed tariff policies on international trade relationships and global commerce. Then, we'll investigate why many California students are not taking advantage of available financial aid opportunities, leaving crucial education funding on the table. And finally, we'll explore a fascinating discovery about ancient Egyptian mummies and the unexpected preservation of their pleasant aromas after thousands of years. All this and more, coming up on Alex's News. In economic news this morning, former President Trump has unveiled what could be one of the most sweeping changes to U.S. trade policy in recent history. Joining us to break down this developing story is our economic correspondent, Ethan Parker. Ethan, what exactly is Trump proposing here?
Well, Grace, according to PBS NewsHour's reporting, Trump signed a presidential memorandum yesterday outlining what he's calling a reciprocal tariff plan. The most striking element is a proposed universal tariff of 10% to 20% on virtually all imports, with an even more aggressive 60% tariff specifically targeting Chinese goods.
That sounds significant. How soon could we see these tariffs take effect?
As CNBC has reported, there's actually going to be a careful evaluation period. Howard Lutnick, who's Trump's nominee for Commerce Secretary, will be conducting detailed studies to determine appropriate tariff levels for each country. Those results aren't expected until April 1st, which is 46 days from now.
And what about the economic impact? How might this affect average Americans?
According to analysis from Moody's Analytics chief economist Mark Zandi, shared with PBS NewsHour, we could be looking at some concerning outcomes. We're talking about higher inflation, increased costs for typical American families, and potential job losses if other countries respond with their own tariffs. It's worth noting that during Trump's previous tariff policies from 2017 to 2021, we saw about 250,000 job losses and a 0.2% reduction in long-term GDP.
Interesting that you mentioned previous tariffs. How has the market responded to this announcement compared to past tariff announcements?
That's actually one of the more surprising aspects of this story, Grace. Financial Times reports that unlike the volatility we saw with Trump's previous tariff announcements, yesterday's market response was remarkably positive. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.8%, the Nasdaq Composite jumped 1.5%, and the S&P 500 increased by 1%.
And what about our international trading partners? How are they reacting to this news?
According to multiple sources, including CNBC and the Financial Times, there's significant concern internationally. The European Union has already warned that these actions could trigger a trade war. There is a notable exception, though. Canada and Mexico are currently exempt from these proposed tariffs due to their commitments to address illegal border crossings and drug trafficking.
Thank you for that comprehensive breakdown, Ethan. We'll be sure to keep our viewers updated as this story develops. We turn now to a developing story in California's education sector. Joining us is our education correspondent Chloe Martinez with details about a concerning trend in financial aid applications. Chloe?
Thanks, Grace. California is facing what officials are calling a crisis in financial aid applications. According to Cal Matters, there's been a dramatic 25% decline in FAFSA completions compared to last year, with an even more alarming 44% drop among students who have at least one undocumented parent.
Those are significant numbers, Chloe. What's driving this decline?
Well, Grace, Daisy Gonzalez, who heads the California Student Aid Commission, points to several factors. As reported by Community College Daily, there's growing concern about the White House's accelerated deportation campaign, and many families are questioning whether their personal information will remain secure.
Are these concerns about data security justified?
That's an important question, Grace. According to Lookout Santa Cruz, FAFSA data is actually protected by multiple federal laws, including the Privacy Act of 1974, FERPA, and Section 483 of the Higher Education Act. There's no historical precedent of this information being shared with immigration authorities.
What's at stake here for California students?
The implications are substantial. A UC advisory group has calculated that if all students with undocumented family members opt out of federal aid, approximately $85 million in grants could go unused. And this affects a significant portion of California's student population. Over 12% of high school students in the state have at least one undocumented parent.
Are there any alternatives for these students?
Yes, there are. California offers the California DREAM Act application, or CADAA, which is a state application that isn't shared with federal agencies. Additionally, 2 new state bills are in development to extend the state aid deadline and expand CADAA eligibility to more Californians.
What's being done to address these concerns at the federal level?
According to Perplexity's analysis, changing the existing protections would require significant legislative action, including amendments to privacy laws or new executive orders. However, recent developments, such as the Department of Homeland Security seeking IRS assistance to identify individuals in the country illegally, have only heightened concerns among affected families.
Thank you for that comprehensive report, Chloe. That was our education correspondent, Chloe Martinez, with story 2 of 3 on this Tuesday morning. Here are some other headlines. A federal funding freeze has caused significant disruption to rural organizations supporting foster youth and job growth. The freeze, initiated by the Trump administration, was briefly rescinded following legal challenges, but continues to create uncertainty for organizations providing critical services in rural communities. In a shocking development at the Justice Department, several high-ranking officials, including acting U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon, have resigned following orders to drop charges against NYC Mayor Eric Adams. The directive came from acting Deputy Attorney General Emile Beauvais, who suggested dropping the case would allow Adams to assist with immigration enforcement. Mexico is threatening legal action against Google over the tech giant's decision to rename the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America on its maps for U.S. users. The change follows a recent executive order by President Trump, with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum strongly opposing the modification. The Trump administration has begun a significant round of layoffs across federal agencies, primarily targeting probationary employees. The Small Business Administration alone has terminated approximately 720 employees, representing 20% of its permanent workforce. This follows a voluntary resignation program that saw 77,000 federal employees accept buyouts. Nevada lawmakers are considering a temporary suspension of the state's cage-free egg law to combat soaring prices. The proposed legislation would allow conventional eggs to be sold in the state for up to 120 days during supply chain disruptions. The move comes as egg prices have reached record highs, averaging nearly $5 per dozen, largely due to an ongoing avian flu outbreak. And now for our third and final story of the morning, we turn to a fascinating discovery about ancient Egyptian mummies. Joining us is our science correspondent, Ethan Parker. Ethan, I understand researchers have uncovered something quite unexpected about these ancient remains?
That's right, Grace. According to a groundbreaking study just published in the Journal of the American Chemical Society, ancient Egyptian mummies actually emit surprisingly pleasant aromas, quite different from what most people might expect.
Pleasant aromas? That's certainly not what comes to mind when we think of mummies. What exactly are researchers detecting?
Well, as reported by ABC News, researchers from University College London and the University of Ljubljana conducted their study at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, examining 9 mummies, some dating back an incredible 5,000 years. They found what they described as woody, spicy, and sweet scents, with distinct floral notes.
What's causing these unexpected fragrances?
According to the Associated Press, it all comes down to the ancient Egyptians' embalming materials. They used an impressive array of substances, including coniferous resins from juniper and cypress trees, myrrh, frankincense, beeswax, and even exotic resins from Southeast Asia like elemi and damar. They even used pistachio resin.
How did researchers manage to analyze these scents without damaging the mummies?
That's a great question. Boston 25 News reports that the team used a sophisticated dual approach. They combined chemical analysis through something called gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, with human sniffers. This non-invasive method allowed them to measure air molecules coming from the sarcophagi without actually touching the mummies.
And what about preservation? Have these scents changed over the millennia?
Interestingly, the research team found no evidence of decay or microbial degradation, which speaks to the excellent preservation conditions at the museum. However, they note that the current scents might differ from the original embalming aromas due to factors like evaporation and oxidation over thousands of years. One fascinating detail reported by Perplexity is that mummies on display actually exhibited stronger and more complex odors compared to those in storage.
Are there any practical applications for this research?
Yes, absolutely. The research team is hoping to recreate these smellscapes for museum exhibits, allowing visitors to experience ancient Egyptian history through their sense of smell. They also believe these scents could help determine a mummy's social class based on the embalming materials used.
Fascinating stuff, Ethan. Thank you for bringing us this remarkable story.
Thank you, Grace.
That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.5, Gemini Flash 2.0, the Perplexity API, and the Google Cloud Text-to-Speech API. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.